And it was Hilda's energy. We would basically have never met again. I mean, that's just the way it happened. But it was her tremendous energy to put this together. And so I wanted to give her credit, and of course we're so sorry that she can't be here. But it's wonderful that Sam was willing to bring her poems and read them, and to get the mic, and so we're very grateful. And I think David is making a film with his telephone, because Hilda knows less about the computer than it is about anybody I know. And she said, will there be somebody there with one of those phones that takes films? And I said, oh, probably half the people there will have that kind of phone. She said, will? So anyway, I hope that works out, because we're going to get that to her. I hate to do this, if it stays like that. I'm going to read 4 love poems that I wrote over a period of 30 years. And I didn't start writing until my mid-40s, and a poet came to New York State Department of Education, English Education, who was a wonderful department at that time, and they said, how can you teach writing if you don't write yourself? I taught high school English, and I had never written a poem, and I had never had my students write a poem, or memoir, or short stories, or personal essays. We wrote, you know what, compositions and book reports and essays and that kind of thing. And so they started having poets come to the class. And the poet said to me, who came to my high school class, and you'll be writing with the class, and you'll be sharing your work with the class. And for me, that was incredibly intimidating. And so I wrote a poem, and he wrote something wonderful across the top. I don't remember exactly what it was, but something in response to this first poem that I had ever written, and I have been writing ever since. So I'm going to read these poems, and these poems are, I sometimes think of poems, because I also write fiction, but I sometimes think of poems as maps back to a place you could never go in any other way. And that's certainly true of some of these love poems that I wrote 30 years ago. And I am still with the same person that I wrote these love poems to. And the first one occurred because I was very much in love, and I was out one morning after that experience and putting the garbage in the trash can. And I realized being that much in love made me incredibly vulnerable. So I wrote this poem, and it's called Cash, and it's Cash, C-A-C-H-E, Cash. Could I cash your kisses, run them stuffed-jawed to some dark stash, braid blisses of these cornucopian dawns to hang bolted in golden hoards, safe deposit certain smiles, line them for winter on warehouse walls. How many seasons, how many green cords of warmth would I need to get through April's final storms? Secure from February's snow, I could be a prodigal spender. What would I care if income outgo? Risked extravagance, sipping these sweet liqueurs to tipsy dance, till frogs spring dervish, then peep out like crocus, a winter stowaway, impervious. That isn't one of the poems I shared with my class. And I certainly didn't share this next poem either, which came a few years later. But as I said, these are all love poems, and this is called Flesh. Here's to flesh, silky flesh, and oh yes, bones. 3 cheers for ridges, hip, and jaw. Let's celebrate the clavicle and the patella, all the spaces where my fingers, toes, and tongue dance upon the bony borders of your body, swirl and sweep and sway, the tarantella and the minuet. Here's to the funny places, to gnarled knees and hairy toes, to nostrils and to knuckles, to the frog king, that sweet swaggerer in all his phallic finery. Bravo, bravo. Here's the flesh, haunch and shoulder, fat and brawn, hurrah to frail and fickle, yielding flesh and jutting bone. And then this next poem that I'm going to read, I wrote many years later, and it's definitely of a slightly different nature. And I have always found being upstate in March the worst of all possible months. I mean, you're so sick of it all. It's so gray. It's so muddy. And so when April comes, they're always, even though in upstate April is sometimes not the best, you know the winter is ending anyway. And so this is a love poem that kind of reflects that rising. April. The shock of forsythia, quince, your thighs when you lean in for the milk. Well, hello, hunger, what a sweet surprise. If one could count on anything beyond now, I count on the trout lily's return. But come March, the barren hills sleet gray, that your thighs are gonna wake a warm beast anywhere on my terrain isn't even on my list. Be thankful, 4 cords of wood left plus all that untethered range. Then heat, thunder, spring night air, and the hollow just below your hip surfaces. Here we are again. You washing your hands at the sink, me peeling potatoes. Each time you pass through my zone, I want to rub my chest against you and purr. But wouldn't you know it, we've been grumpy so long, just when I'm watching your fingers peel back the plastic on the Cheerios, you're soliloquizing CD rollovers. You've refurbished an old hideout, and it's gonna take a lot of good dinners and going alongs. Only a few nights ago, the peepers woke, a more discordant opera of hankering you never heard, such a din of longing. Each me, tuning up. Imagine the transcription. What librettist ever got babble better? The gospel of love. And then my final poem, every winter we go to Florida, and my partner always feels he has to drive back from Florida to Gilbertsville to look over his property to make sure everything's okay. So he's usually gone once a month for 1 week. And I'm an only child, and I want to tell you, I love to be alone. And so, I wouldn't want to live alone all the time, but 1 week a month is good. So, when he leaves, and I realize that for 1 week, I am going to be able to move completely to my own rhythm. I'm going to do things exactly the way I do them, which those of you who live with people know, you're always both of you giving in some ways to how you would actually do it. At least that's been my experience. And so whenever he goes, I always write with that burst, sort of a bird out of the cage kind of thing. I always write a poem that's related to that. And so this is one I think I wrote last winter, related to it. In your absence, the yard cat, Flower, has started sleeping on top of the fridge, and I've reverted to practices that bring the same joy as reading Nancy Drew's On My Cot at Camp Ann Bailey, rain drumming on the roof when I was 10. I instant videoed 2 full seasons of HBO's 6 Feet Under, which adds up to attending 24 funerals in 12 days. My sloth runneth over. On the following issues, Flower and I are in complete accord. The lack of import of Michelle Obama's senior Princeton thesis, that sugar, not the loss of societal shame, is the reason so many people are fat. plus a whole range of other untold topics. One thing I'm especially proud of: when you return in 15 days, I will be able to face you with this declaration. Though sorely tempted, I stuck to our resolution that we were giving up dark chocolate nuggets. And if you broke down and had a Hershey bar, or 3, or 4, I'm not gonna lord it over you. Julie Suarez will be our final reader, and then if you want some more food, there's still lots of it over there, so please be sure, come back. And also I want to remind you that the Windfall Dutch Farm appreciates any donations that you might want to give for the maintenance of this beautiful building. And there is a box right by the door if you decide you want to do that. Okay, thank you.